Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Today, we're going to talk about the great NASA Administrator James Webb and learn some things about him. I hope you will that you never thought about, including him leading NASA into the civil rights movement in the 60s. And we got this beautiful green screen of a Webb Telescope photograph released about a year ago showing the cosmic edge or there, so to speak. And got Marty behind the camera here doing a few little adjustments. Looking good, Marty. Thank you. Marty Winkle, of course, has done over 990 episodes of Stay Curious with me, and we're looking at our 1000th episode to celebrate it on Leap Day, February 29th. How about that? So we're going to make some plans for that we'll let you know about. But that's my way of saying we love y'all for watching us day after Valentine's. The love will continue. We're not going to let those roses wilt. We're going to let you know how much we care in many ways. And some of those ways is presenting some events that you can be part of if you're local, or fly in if you're not. Space Memorabilia Show this Saturday at the Beachside Hotel and Suites in Cocoa Beach. That's right beside Ron John's on the south side. I believe IHOP's across the street. And we're very appreciative to Ken Havicott and his wife Teresa for all their support. Ken is one of the world premier collectors. If you have something that you want to praise in your local, or we'll make arrangements so you can get in touch with Ken and send him photos and so forth. He's the man. He's been doing it since the 70s, and he's a great inspiration to all of us space collectors out there. So we're going to do that and enjoy the fellowship. And if you want an astronaut autograph or buy a good book, there'll be some clothing and a lot of stuff that the American Space Museum will have at discounted rates, like a lot of flat photos and stuff. $10 a suggested donation at the door, and we'll let you in for free. But we are a nonprofit, and we're grateful to Computers Advancing Education. They have supplied our museum with free computers, just like they have thousands of kids in Brevard County for better part of a decade. And they've been so gracious to us. And Bruce Jacobs, our IT guy, has been our connection with their fabulous crew. Bid Again Auctions, of course, helps keep our doors open with the funds we need from the auctions that are now almost once a month. We're having an auction. They went from quarterly to more ambitious under the tutelage there, Bid Again Auctions. And the Museums of Brevard, 22 beautiful museums that each celebrate the unique heritage of Brevard County, the mob, and they are an important fixture at the American Space Museum. And of course, we helped found that Museums of Brevard about 10 years ago. So it is a 501c3. So all of these nonprofits and our great space collector will be there. We'll tell you Friday a little more about some of the stuff that you can buy, or and a little more about our eBay store that we're been launching. Want to give a shout out to Christopher Mick from Hudson, Wisconsin. Christopher, great to see you there. And we are he is in the launch control of Axiom, Marty. And Christopher's been in the museum a time or two. One of our great early supporters when we were just floundering around with our first dozen episodes. Christopher Mick found us. So love shouting out to you. He is a solar system ambassador doing great things up there in Hudson, Wisconsin. Those of you that come frequently here or have seen a launch, this is a bridge, a footbridge being built between the Mercury Monument area at Spaceview Park and over to the Gemini Monuments. And we're so excited about this. Our executive director, Karan, Conklin's checking to see if hot places have frozen over. It's because we thought it would take that before this would finally happen. One of my first ideas when I came here like 7 years ago is, Karan, why don't they have a bridge between the two monuments there across that little lagoon? And by golly, it'll be up by the end of April, they say. And I enjoy that because on the other side, we have the Mercury astronauts, hands in bronze, and on the other side are Gemini astronauts in bronze. And it's really fabulous. Marty's showing it there. Yep, there's a big, tall structure there that has names of space workers on the pylons there. And to the left is there. So we'll keep you updated with that. Very exciting. And we saw a beautiful launch from there yesterday. A daytime launch. I believe the last 50 launches, 40 of them have been at night. And they kind of all look the same at night. But the day ones you can follow, like I did with binoculars, and watch that beautiful light at it's exactly 5:30. This was a Department of Defense top secret mission that everybody started talking about. That it was satellites to detect early warning of nuclear missiles that we think Russia's got now that are a little better than ours. Nuclear tip rockets, I guess you'd say. There's the swing arm to the left there, Marty. You want to point that out? You got your a pointer going, the swing arm of Pad 39A, where on February 28th, 4 astronauts will be going with Crew Dragon 8 to the space station. Should have brought one of them T-shirts in, Marty. It probably would have set on fire if I held it up. But there's Carlton, but we'll show you that T-shirt. We're going to be selling beautiful T-shirts of the 8th crew contracted under the Commercial Astronaut Program by NASA. And it includes the first American male to go to space in 6 months. That's Barrett. What's Barrett's first name? I knew I'd clip me up there. And we have an African-American lady going up, Janet Epps. So Marty's going to look that up for me. And Carlton got a daytime shot of a booster coming back right down in somebody's backyard. All right. Hold the barbecue, honey. There's a rocket coming in over the back porch. And that's about what it's like to see around here as it comes down to landing zone 1 and 2. Marty, you're going to chime in there. Go ahead, buddy.
Michael
Barrett. Yeah, Michael Barrett. So he's a seasoned ISS astronaut. So we have 2 Americans up there, but they're both ladies, Jasmine Mogali and Laura O'Hara. Thank you, CB, for those great shots. That's one, I think that's your best one so far, right before the legs spring out. And then there's another one where they spring out right behind those trees there. Happy birthday. We've got a wonderful astronaut that I know has been getting a lot of love today. And that's Leland Melvin. He's turning 60 years old. There he is with his Rhodesian Ridgebacks. He's a big dog lover, and he's certainly popularized this breed of dogs. 60 years old, born February 15th, 1964 in Lynchburg, Virginia. A veteran of 2 flights of Atlantis. We got to get him over here, Marty, to see Atlantis. And Melvin was uniquely drafted by the Detroit Lions of the National Football League in the 11th round. They only do 7 rounds now. In the 1986 draft, he was in training camp, but had his knee blown out. Actually went to Detroit, I think Cowboys training camp. But he set a lot of records at the University of Virginia. He went University of Richmond in Virginia. He was a wide receiver, set a lot of their passing records. So a real athlete and a real scientist. He's been working on the non-destruct evaluation science branch at NASA Langley. Had something to do with the X-33 reusable launch vehicle program that got scrapped by Lockheed Martin. And really a lot of Facebook presence. That's a Detroit Lions jersey for Dave Stang. He's saying, don't show me that anymore. He's just what he's saying, Marty. He says, I can't stand to see that blue for a while. They kind of blew their chance to go to the Super Bowl, you non-football fans. There's what we love seeing Leland doing. They call him Lee, teaching kids stuff. He wrote a book called Chasing Space, and it was turned into a kid's book too, Chasing Space. So very engaging, very friendly guy out there. That's a bad slide that's in the way there. That's, of course, President Dwight Eisenhower, and he created NASA out of the National Aeronautic Committee of the aeronautics. So that slides out of whack. There's the Rhodesian Ridgehounds that the suit tech involved with this. She told us she was so freaked out that those claws of those dogs would tear the suit, because that's a real spacesuit. All right, that's not one that they use for like a costume set. They put on their real gear when they're out getting used to wearing it on there. So, who am I thinking about? The suit tech there in Houston. I'm blanking out on that, Marty. She wrote a book too. Shay is her little alter ego. McDougal, Sharon McDougal, yes. And there's Leland with his book. All right. He goes to a lot of astronaut events, and I think a lot of those are around the Washington, D.C. area, Smithsonian and so forth. But we hope he could come and be part of the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex Astronaut Encounter Program someday. Well, let's talk a little bit about this gentleman, James Webb. There is his official NASA picture. As I drop a few of my notes here. He was the second appointed NASA director. Actually, Hugh Dryden was the deputy director after Keith Glennon. Keith Glennon was first. He stepped down briefly. Dryden was the temporary, but he is officially the second to accept this post of NASA administrator. And he was quite a guy. Some of his background is born in 1906. When was he born? Let me get October 7th in Tally Ho, North Carolina. Now STEM, S-T-E-M, STEM. Thanks for looking that up, Marty. But it was called Tally Ho, and I don't even know where STEM is, but I know where Hickory is, and some of these other towns over there. Of course, Charlotte area. But he lived to age 85 and died in 1992. So he certainly saw the success of NASA that he helped plant. And he planted one of the most successful things in NASA that led to diversity, leading the way in diversity, in fact. And I'll tell you about that here in a second. A little bit about his background. He was a private attorney, an ex-Marine, hoorah for that, lieutenant colonel in the Marines, went to Chapel Hill there at University of North Carolina. His resting place is Arlington National Cemetery. And, of course, he was a Democrat, strongly connected in the Democrat Party and politics. That's why President Kennedy nominated him and appointed him in 1961 on this date, February 15th. President Truman had Webb serve as Undersecretary of State at the U.S. State Department. So he certainly knew about keeping secrets. He was involved in the invasion of North Korea into South Korea in the State Department. So he got some chops there to handle people in tense situations. We'll get back to him in just a second. There he is inside of a spaceship. That was inside the Gemini spaceship there. Like I said, a longtime Washington insider with the backing of President Johnson, he was able to produce continued support and resources for Apollo. It was a good thing President Johnson was behind the space program when President Kennedy was murdered, because had he not been, Congress could have easily been swayed to just dump the whole program. And it took money, lots of money, and Webb and Bob Mueller were the two people on the Hill. Mueller, Johnson Space Center manager. Talk about him one day, how important these people were to be going to Congress in the face of disaster at times and asking for more money. One of the disasters going on didn't involve people. It was the first 7 Ranger camera satellites to crash into the moon to take pictures had failed, and he and Mueller and others were pulled in front of Congress. Why are we wasting money on these that aren't working? And finally, I think Ranger 7, 8, and 9 worked, but we needed those pictures to judge how rough the surface of the moon was. While we have him on here, involved with the CIA in 1968. All right. Well, he was well into the end of his tenure as NASA administrator. He believed that Russia had the heavy N-1 rocket that was their crewed vehicle for lunar rockets, and he said they were ready to go. And he directed NASA to prepare Apollo 8 for a possible lunar orbit mission that year. And at the time, Webb's assertions about Soviet Union's abilities were doubted by some, and the N-1 moon rocket of Russia was dubbed Webb's Giant, unquote. However, at the collapse of the Soviet Union, revelations about the Soviet moonshot had given support to Webb's conclusions. Very smart man. We're going to talk about one of his big contributions here in a minute. That when I read it, I thought this is a great man and worthy of the Webb Telescope. Hugh Dryden. I'm not Hugh Dryden. This is Keith Glennon in kind of a business shot of the time that you don't see very much of. He's the first administrator of NASA. What is the administrator of NASA? The highest ranking official of the space agency. Its chief decision maker, responsible for providing clarity to the agency's vision and serving as a source of leadership. Today is, of course, Bill Nelson is our administrator. It, of course, is a political appointment. And we have had, I think, 16 of them, all very interesting people. 14, Bill's 14th one. A couple interim ones, all right, that we had in there. Jim Bridenstine was the previous one. Charlie Bolden, under the Obama administration, also served 8 years on there. We'll talk about some of them, but some of them you wouldn't even know their names. Others you remember their names for their impact. Many don't remember who followed Webb and was over the administration during the Apollo moon landings per se in 1969-71. We'll remind you of that. This guy was very interesting and did a lot. He was actually at one time a studio manager of Paramount Pictures and Sam Goldwyn Studios, and a Yale University grad. When President Eisenhower asked him to lead NASA, he was a president of Case Institute of Technology in Cleveland, Ohio. Talking about Keith Glennon. The National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, formed shortly after the Wright brothers. Its 8,000 employees and its budget of $100 million and 3 major research labs were turned into the new National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And this is the guy who led it for 3 years that were very critical to forming what we were going to do. He acquired control of the Jet Propulsion Lab as a NASA contractor from the California Institute of Technology. He created the NASA Army Ballistic Missile Agency to become the Marshall Space Flight Center, and so on and so on. Started our satellite program, started the U.S. Department of Defense satellite program. Keith Glennon, very underrated person, and under him was Hugh Dryden. Now, Hugh Dryden was a visionary. And Hugh Dryden was the deputy under Keith. And, of course, when they stepped down, some of them briefly assumed that role. What you need to know about Dryden is this little, of course, the Dryden Test Facility is notorious at Edwards Air Force Base. And this is a first-day cover from Edwards Air Force Base on March 26, 1976, commemorating it being called that, the research center. And he says, here's just an idea how great this guy was. He says, quote, "I am convinced that the power to travel where we will in space and return at will marks the opening of a brilliant new stage in man's evolution," unquote, from Hugh Dryden. So he calls space travel not just a thing to take us into the future, but he calls it part of man's evolution. And we've got other visionaries like Elon Musk, Marty, talking about we need to evolve to be a multi-planet species and get to Mars as soon as we can. So That's Hugh Dryden, whose name that you hear a lot about and might not know what he looks like. Hugh Dryden's on the left there. There's Keith Glennon on the right, holding something. Oh, that's when NACA became NASA. And President Eisenhower, very much pro-space, but he always tempered it with how the world saw us dominating the Earth. Russia and China have no problem with that, but America, land of the free, we want to keep the Earth free, and Eisenhower's very big on that. But there's Eisenhower with Glennon. They're talking about some first pictures of the Earth from a Tyros satellite there in the Oval Office. So I love sharing this history, and Keith Glennon certainly also lived a long life. He died at age 89 in 1995, all right, about the same time as Webb. So they both saw the fruits of their labors to help to make us an interplanetary species, we hope one day. Well, there is Webb. I've shown this picture many times. He's holding up the lunar orbiter that I think 4 of those, maybe 5, I forget, successfully orbited the moon, taking pictures, developing the pictures on the spacecraft and sending them back to Earth or scanning them. And then the Grumman Moonlander, the first version of that in the 1961 era there. After the moon landing, after we changed presidents, from Johnson said he wasn't going to run anymore, then Richard Nixon won the 1968 presidency. Webb stepped down, and this guy took over as the NASA administrator, and Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine was the administrator during the moon landings, and for a period of he was just there for about a year and a half, and then George Low took over, and James Fletcher. They had about 3 administrators in a 3-year period. Of course, Nixon's resignation had a little bit to do with that. Gerald Ford put Fletcher in there for Low. We'll do that history another time. But this was the administrator, Tom Paine, pretty good guy. He also championed civil rights, and talk about him in a little bit later on another show. Here's the Webb Telescope. Just wanted to say, as you're seeing your feed of news almost every day saying Webb Telescope discovers a galaxy that shouldn't be there. Webb Telescope finds atmosphere like Earth on a planet orbiting a star just 8 light years away. All this stuff is because of these hexagonal mirrors, 27 feet across. About one of these mirror segments is the size of the Hubble telescope. And this sun shield, they call it, keeps it cold, like 250 degrees below zero cold. That's where the instruments work best in the infrared. But just to give you an idea of how all this had to be folded up and then unfolded in a spacecraft fairing, the Ariane 5 did that. There is a space from a selfie shot from space. And one of those mirrors, that bright one right there, just one of those, is the Hubble. So you can imagine the science we're getting is incredible. And it's worthy that this man, Webb, is honored by this and these beautiful cosmic scenes that we're seeing here. And to end our little talk about Mr. Webb being chosen today, the great James Webb. I don't think anybody called him Jim or Jimmy, Marty. He was a serious guy, talking about serious matters all the time. He was encouraged by President Kennedy and then Johnson to make racial integration a priority for NASA. And here during February, we talk about Black History Month. This man has a lot to do with Black history in America, and here's why. He publicly supported and said NASA was supporting the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is reported that Webb and Werner von Braun famously confronted and lectured segregist Alabama Governor George Wallace on racial integration in front of the press. I haven't had time to look that up. It's probably on YouTube. In 1961, NASA had the worst reputation for Black employees among any government agency in 1961. When James Webb stepped down in 1968, it was not only the best representation of blacks in government agency, but it was considered the model for other government agencies on how to put racial integration into your departments. So a tremendous man. And then, of course, he had the Apollo 1 accident on his watch in 1967. And he's quoted as saying, we always knew something like that was going to happen sooner or later, but we never thought it would happen on the ground. And some insiders that I talk to on a regular basis, they love what SpaceX and Blue Origin are doing, and go Sierra Nevada and Boeing Starliner. But these insiders that lived through the tragedies of NASA once in a while say to me, these new companies have not had a bad day yet. And that's where you truly trust character. And you're going to need a giant of a man or woman like this man to get you through it. And he did. And you know how he did it? He promised to be truthful in assessing the blame where it was, and he put the blame on his office, himself, and the NASA management. It was purposely to take the heat off of finding a witch hunt of what was the problem, so that the investigation could go on and the problem be fixed. And we honor James Webb. When you hear the Webb Telescope, now you know the giant of a man that is truthfully named after. So thank you all for letting us share that with you on Stay Curious. Again, to remind you of a thing called postage. The U.S. Postal Service delivers letters and things inside of envelopes. Of course, I'm being facetious there, Marty. But here's a beautiful first day cover of the James Webb Telescope on there, and a beautiful collection for your space place or space cave. Well, let's give some love to the moon a little bit. The love of the moon we're coming to is from because we launched a lunar flight last night. And Marty, just a heads up, I'm going to end today's show with talking about the moon. I thought I'd talk about the sun, but I'm going to talk about the sun tomorrow. So we're coming into the home stretch here. I want to say one other thing about Webb. Okay, before I get into James Webb, I'd like to say one other thing. This is from the late Hugh Harris, who passed away a year ago. He, of course, was the voice of NASA, and Hugh Harris said that, yes, James Webb was, quote, a public affairs enigma. Or you couldn't read him. It wasn't an open book. All right. But Hugh Harris said he was a good guy, one of the best administrators from a standpoint of having a relationship with Congress, because we needed money, and just unbelievable amounts of money for the 60s. And you had the civil rights movement going on, in the Vietnam War also taking our treasury back against the wall. Hugh Harris also said that on the Apollo 1 fire, he deflected criticism by taking the blame and not hiding the problem. That's where I got that from Hugh. And definitely, James Webb kept the focus on the moon and beating Russia to the moon. And it was a moon race. And folks, today we're in a moon race with China. And though nobody talks much about it, when we ask them, everybody from astronaut Charlie Walker to astronaut wrangler Nick Thomas, everybody says we are in a moon race. So with China, so we need some great leadership, and not saying it isn't there. Love for the moon, a beautiful launch last night. We know some of you space geeks like watching our Stay Curious show, like Connie McDaniel and Bill Whiting were there. So we'll get the full report from you all. As I heard that, it wasn't until after 1 o'clock, so you probably didn't get back till after 3. But that gives you an idea. Have some fun with the moon. You can always cover it up with your little finger. It's big and bright. And having a date again tonight with Jupiter. It was on the right side of Jupiter last night. It's going to be right under Jupiter tonight. And then on the 16th, tomorrow night, it's going to be on the left of Jupiter. All right. They launched the Intuitive Machines Nova Class C lander It's got 6 landing gear there spread out. That's how it was launched. I think it's 14 feet tall, I read. About 6 NASA ride shares on it to investigate everything from how the dust settles as it's landing to 6 other private companies on there, including a Wi-Fi and a hard drive and some special cameras. So this is cool. It's going to take about 7 days to get to the moon. They're saying November 29th, 22nd. I think it's like in the middle of the night. We'll update you on that. That engine's got to work. It's full of methane. We know that because that was the problem the other night, fueling it. And there's the shot of it getting away. So we wish them well. Telemetry's going good. And where's it going to land? Where's it going to land? All right. Here's where it's going to land. See, that arrow says South Pole. You look down at the bottom of the moon, and even in binoculars, you'll see that's the most cratered area of the moon. The top of the moon isn't, but the back of the moon looks all like this anyway. There's no of those seas on the backside. Malapert Massif. Malapert right there is where it's headed. And the Massif means mountain ridge, all right? And you see how bright that is? I'm going to take you there in a minute. This is a lunar reconnaissance orbiter that's been up there 12 years orbiting the moon. It was launched, I'll bet, from Pad 41. So when they talk about, moon missions and unmanned moon missions, yeah, NASA had a good one and gives us these great pictures. This is what the lunar reconnaissance does is it takes temperature readings. The blue is very cold, like 100 below zero. The brown is 100 above zero, where sunlight is capturing craters and high areas. Those low areas never get sunlight, some of them, and that's where we think ice is from comets and asteroids that have smacked into the moon over billions and billions of years. 4.5 billion year old moon. It's had over 4 billion years, of course, of being impacted since it's been a solid. Shackleton there in the middle is another crater, often regarded as a place to land Artemis 3. This is the what do I call it? Them there hills in the Gold Rush, okay? This is where people want to put their spacecraft. JAXA put one there. Russia failed to put one there. And India put one there, all right? All to find out how much of these H2O molecules and what form are they in this area that never gets sunlight, all right? Now, Malapert's right there in front of us. This is where we're landing. Again, here is Malapert. And here is the mountain range of the Massif, that bright area there, triangle, is Malapert, and it's going to land somewhere in that flat area there. So how cool is that? That this is what we know about landing on the moon in today's space age as we quarter way through the 25th century and private companies now on the way to the moon for it's not the first time they're going to try to land, not the first time they're going to try. Hopefully they'll be successful. Peregrine wasn't, all right, because of an anomaly in their fuel system. So fingers crossed for Intuitive Machines to pave the way, not just because they're the company to do it, but because they are demonstrating the technology of all mankind to do it. So, Marty, we've got our friends watching today. We're Doug Forrest in Los Angeles, Cynthia Rossi, local here, Tommy Usiak in Pennsylvania, Dave Stange in Michigan, the Astronaut Files, that is John Borelli up there in New York. John, thank you for your support. Tom Celentano is in Connecticut, and Steve Jokums is up there in Illinois on the shores of Lake Michigan. And Carlton Bailey is he's at Canaveral Groves, just down the road here, about 30 miles from our studios inside the American Space Museum, where we are always happy to stay curious. And hope you do tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be Friday, the 16th. We'll give you some space history, update you about our next auction to support our museum, and show you a little bit of some fun pictures from some of our other memorabilia shows as we prepare to have fun and fellowship with a dozen vendors coming up Saturday. So, Marty, thanks for a great Streamlabs job. And until next time, I'm Mark Marquette saying, I can't wait to bridge the space between us.